Hi, it's Charlie from TaxCare, the first site that allows you to find and assess local tax relief professionals. Today we have a special guest, Herb Cantor, a former IRS revenue agent and appeals officer who worked at the IRS for 40 years. Herb is going to briefly touch on the audit process, exactly how he would pick a tax return to audit, and what you should do if you receive an IRS audit or examination letter. So Herb, can you discuss at a high level the IRS audit process?
Generally speaking, the IRS audit process, it's very complicated. But again, generally speaking, if somebody, for example, omits income where a W-2 form was issued to the IRS, and for example, let's say it was my money and I didn't report it on my tax return, I will get a letter in the mail from the IRS saying you forgot to include a specific dollar amount of income from wages from the Internal Revenue Service. So at that point, I can either contact the IRS and say it's not right, or I agree to it. Of course, the IRS will put penalties on there, but that's one way of the IRS auditing. The other part, which is the one that I dealt with, is the IRS will send many tax returns locally to wherever you're located. I'm located in the Fort Lauderdale area. The IRS, probably from the Atlanta Service Center, will send tax returns to my manager, for example, in Fort Lauderdale. The manager will say, Herb, do you need some cases to work? I say, yes. Well, she'll either assign me cases, or since I was a senior revenue agent, the manager will allow me to go into her file cabinet where all the tax returns are sitting, and she'll say, pick out 2 or 3 that you think have the most audit potential. And I'll take those returns, send out appointment letters, and start the examination process. That's how most audits start. Not all of them, but most of them. And the ones that I dealt with in the IRS.
How did you actually pick tax returns to audit? I'm assuming it wasn't as random as picking names out of a hat.
I will review the return and see if it has any audit potential. Now, if I think there's audit potential, but it's only going to generate a few $100s, I'm not going to audit that return, of course, because that's my time that's being wasted. But if I look at the return and I see that it's a business that's showing a loss every year, that return might be audited. If I see, I'm just looking for a few things on the return, expenses that are very high, maybe sales that appear very low. There are different factors I look at to determine which corporations to audit, which individuals to audit, so on and so forth. But that's basically the determination that I use.
What is one piece of advice you could give to taxpayers who receive an IRS audit or examination letter?
It's always a good idea to hire a tax professional when you're going before the IRS. I mean, if you owe a couple $100, $1,000, you can work it on your own. But if you owe upwards of 10, 15, 20,000 or a lot more, you definitely should hire someone to represent you, because you may say something or do something when you meet the IRS that you shouldn't have, and that may open the audit to other related entities that you may own, other corporations, partnerships, other tax years. And I always tell people, even when I worked at the IRS, somebody who owes a lot of money, I would ask them, are you being represented by somebody? And if they said no, I said, well, you may want to consider that. I cannot recommend people, but I always told people, yes, if you're going to think about hiring, do it now before we get started. Most people decided to do that, which I thought was an excellent idea, because then usually we were able to resolve the case. Now, since I work on the other side, now I tell people, yes, you should hire somebody to represent you, to make sure that you don't say something you're not supposed to, because I've seen IRS people open up audits because just maybe a few words that you said that you shouldn't have. And that's where I come in, or your representative, whoever you decide to hire, where I will tell people, look, I will represent you so you don't have to deal with the IRS. That's where I come in, and that's where I try to help you proceed with a smooth audit so there are no surprises.